there's going to be a phase difference because the mics aren't on the same plane. So by having the mics aside from each other, I'm going to get a weird overtone that I don't want. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell mic number 2 to not come on until I actually hit tom 2. So what you have to do is you hit tom 1, and while you're watching the signal of tom 1, you're looking at tom 2's microphone input. And you're going to close the gate until when I hit tom 1, it doesn't pick up on mic number 2. Does that make sense? And so you do that by adjusting the attack. That's this right here. Now it does work. So by adjusting the attack, this is going to be how fast I want it to grab it, and then the next thing is going to be at what frequency do I want it to move. Let's see, which one of these? There we go. Okay, so the threshold and the attack work together. Okay, the attack is how fast I want it to act. Because a tom strike is really quick, I need it to act fast. So I'm going to set my attack time really low, really low, so that it immediately opens up. Now with this configuration right now, there is no gate at all. But when I take this and I begin to bring it this way, what's going to happen is that you would see the sound coming up on the meter, and as I move this further this direction, it's going to take more and more sound to open that gate. So if you think of this as the gate, how loud is that other microphone got to hit before that gate will close? You know the gate is closed if that red line goes down. If it goes this way, that line would open if we had a signal coming through it. But since there's no signal, even at 0, that is off. So you're going to look at, let's just say this is tom 1 and this is tom 2. So while I'm hitting tom 1's mic, I'm actually going to be looking at 2. And I'm going to be looking at the 2 here because this mic, when turned on, is going to be picking up this signal. But I'm going to continue to adjust the gate here with this threshold until it no longer opens that gate. But then I have to be careful that when I actually select tom 2 and I hit tom 2, that the gate is still not closed, because the gate has to open when I hear this. Now, that's relatively straightforward. There are a couple of things that are parameters in this that you need to know, and that is, how long do you want the gate to stay open? So if I hit a drum, doom, it's going to get softer immediately. So it's loud when I first strike it, and then it immediately goes off. Ann, are you allergic to me?
I just sneeze a lot.
Oh. So I hit it, doom, and it drops off. Here's the thing. If I don't leave the gate open long enough, when I hit the drum, what happens is, doom, it'll immediately cut it off. So that is the release. So what I'm going to do, I want the attack to be really fast, but I'm going to touch the release right here, and I want the release to stay open a little bit longer. So now what it does, it'll go doom, doom. That's the way you want it to be. Sometimes you'll hit a tom, and if there's no gels on it or the drum kit's not tuned right, you'll hit it doom. It'll just sit there and resonate forever. That's not what you want, because if it's resonating, it's messing up the whole muddy mix. So you want to set your release time so that it goes doom, doom. That's pretty much the way that'll go. So that's how you set the release. And the same thing for the hold time. The hold time will be, at what point do I want it to hold? I want it to hold for X number of milliseconds, and then I want it to release. So it's going to be doom, doom. And that's what these 3 are doing. The attack is how fast it goes. The hold is how long I want the gate to stay open to allow the sound. And then when it hits that threshold, how fast do I want it to close? So it's kind of like slamming the door or closing the door gently, the release time. The hold time is how long I want it to stay open. I want it to stay open long enough for the real tone that I want to be there, but then when it gets beyond that, I want it to close, in a manner that sounds good. So that's the gate. Any questions on the gate before we go to the compressor? Gate keeps unwanted sounds out. So here's another thing that happens. Handling noise on microphones. This is a big thing that happens, particularly with wireless mics or mics that are put in stands. Somebody walks over to get out of the stand and they're fighting before they get the mic out of the stand. If you set the gate properly, you can cut all that out. Because you set the gate, you take the low end, like we were talking about the high pass filter, you set that so you get all the rumble out of it, and then by setting the gate, it's like until somebody's actually singing in it, it's going to cut out that sound. That, obviously if they're smacking the mic, or they're really getting an arm in it to pull it out, but for the most part, if it's just normal handling noise, I just reach over and I twist it to pull it out, you can set the gate and it'll cut that noise out, which is a good thing. The other thing is If y'all ever done a children's cantata and you had a bunch of wireless mics up there, whoo, the gate will save your life. Because what will happen is like, you know, Dustin's got a mic on him and I got a mic and we're talking to each other. His mic's picking me up, I'm picking him up. But if I don't want his mic to be picking me up, I gate his mic when I'm talking. So what happens is everybody that's on stage that's not speaking at that moment, their mics are turned off. But as soon as they speak, their mic turns on, which is what you want, because you get a whole bunch of open mics on the stage and things are going to feed back and they're going to turn towards it. And boy, I hate lapel mics when I have a non-digital console, because you can't stop that from happening. You're muting like crazy, absolutely. So that's a good description, actually. A gate can be the same as a mute. If you set it right, it will mute when there's not something on that channel. But as soon as there is something on that channel, it turns it on, but it's doing it automatically. It's like an auto ducker is another way to do it. Like if you ever use a CB radio or something that had music playing in, and you key in on this, the music kind of drops down below, and then as soon as you key up, it comes back up. Same sort of thing, an auto ducking feature. A gate is similar to that. All right, the compressor I want to spend a minute on, because this is something that if you understand correctly, it can make a huge amount of difference in what your sound is. So a compressor does two things. It can make primarily things that are loud softer. It'll take somebody that's singing, you know, if Agan and I are singing together and I have a big voice and Agan doesn't sing as loud as I do, they're like, man, I got to get Nick to be quieter. He's too loud. And so if you're not using the gate, what are you doing? You're constantly riding this to keep my level in check. Well, what the compressor does is it automatically says, when a sound gets above this level, we're going to bring it down. So we can make loud singers all kind of be at the same level.
So for Tom, pretty much.
I'll say it, Ian.
So when that person sings too loud, it'll automatically bring that down. But there's also the sides, you got little Susie Sunshine, who doesn't sing very loud. And she's getting buried by everybody else. And you're like, I need to get Susie louder. So what can I do? You can use the compressor in reverse. So what happens is you set her level, remember we did the preamps to get them in the green, you set her mic really hot. But then what you do is you set a compressor underneath that gains it up. So if she doesn't sing loud enough, so it's like, see if I can explain it this way. So as she is singing normally, it's compressing her voice. You're setting the compressor to compress her even when she's softer, so that when she gets more soft, the compressor lets off, which lets her sing louder. It makes her sound louder. So because this happens
So we're
a lot.
not struggling with feedback by trying to get more out of it.
Right. Because what happens is you'll see a lot of people just like, yeah, and they'll pull their mic way out here, you know, or they're singing with their mic way down here. This is another way to keep that volume consistent. So if you're singing in your mic like this, then all of a sudden you pull your mic way out like that, because like, I really don't know my part and I don't want anybody to hear me. Well, that's actually going to,
because I'm singing high notes.
it's going to bring you back up into the mix. So for recording purposes, and specifically because we're doing TV, we want the volumes to be consistent across through there. So that's what the compressor will do. And so, you know, we talked about attack and we talked about release and hold. Same things are in function here. So let's look across the top. We have the attack and the release. The attack is always how quick do I want it to operate. Well, if Ann's going to bust a high note and all of a sudden she's just going to lay everybody out on the stage, I need to compress her very quickly. So I want my attack time, as I touch the attack time, it turns yellow. I want to make that be very quick. So as soon as she hits that big note and it's super loud, I want her to pull her down. Then the release is just like on the gate. How long or how fast do I want it to cut her off? Well, with vocals, yeah.
What's the indicator that you just showed for attack?
It says attack on it.
Now turn the button and watch it.
Where's there a number or something?
Yeah,
There's a
it's
bar.
the knob. You see it lit. You see the knob lit right here.
Turn it, Nick, so you
Okay.
can see the chart. See,
It's the
and
red
then
bar.
And there's a bar under that.
see the bar right there.
Okay, I see it.
There you go.
Yeah, so that's where the attack is. It's just that it's hard to see on the
We're
TV.
looking at the graph.
Yeah, and then the release is the same thing. It's how quickly do I want it to release in order to make that happen. Then you'll notice over here, now the difference that you notice between the gate and between the compressor is that on the gate, remember it was over here because the input signal was coming this way. When it's doing the compressor, we're actually thinking in terms of bringing something down. So as I compress it, I'm looking at doing it this way, which is going to bring that down. Now the other thing can be is the frequency. Here, if I want to to roll out a frequency or to add a frequency, I can do that over here. So it's going to compress just a frequency in that situation. I generally kind of leave that off because the instrument could be something different. All right, here's the things that we're actually going to be working on: the ratio, the threshold, and the gain. Now, the gain for a person that's always too loud, you're just going to leave it at 0. The ratio is how hard do I want this compressor to work. See that little bitty top portion of that is just a slight slant right there? If I press the ratio button right here, notice how that doesn't slant as much anymore. The more that I go turning the knob clockwise, the flatter that gets. Now, as it's angled like that, what it's called is a soft knee compression, meaning that if you think of a limiter says when a signal gets to a certain level, we're done. It's not going to let it get beyond that. That's the limit. That's all there is, and it gets there. So when that frequency is flat like this, it's actually operating as a limiter. It just says when you get to that volume level, it just shuts you off. Well, that doesn't sound musical, so we really don't want it to do that. What we want it to do is, as she sings louder, we want it to just grab, just like you would do here. You would just start pulling them down a little bit. You want it to sound that way. So what happens is you're going to leave this a little bit of an angle. But then what we're going to do is we're going to go down to the threshold, and we're actually going to bring it down. See what's happening here? So now anything above this level that you want. So let's just state it this way. See where this 0 level line is right there? Mm-hmm. So I don't want the signal level to get above the 0. But she can sing at a +5 because she's really loud. So what I do is I want to set my ratio in such a way that I get the little bit of a slope like we've got right here, which for vocals generally is somewhere between 2.5 and 4. Those are like somebody that just is constantly tearing it up, you're going to set them at 4. But somebody that's just occasionally gets there when they sing a high note, maybe a 2.5, maybe a 3. But the slope is going to say, I'm going to gradually bring you down, but I'm still not going to let you get above 0. But as you get closer to that point, I'm going to start bringing it down already. So it's like if I know the song is coming and she's going to hit this big note at the beginning, I'm going to go ahead and start preparing for that as she's getting into that mode. I'm pulling it down. Well, that's what this is going to do. It's creating a slope. So when it's down here at -10, it's already going to begin bringing her down, but it's going to make it sound natural as she continues to build and sing louder. It's just going to let a lower slope. Then the release is the same thing. How quick, once she gets to that point, do I want it to go back to normal? That's musical. You just use your ears and listen to it. If it sounds normal in whatever range, just leave it. If it sounds like it's cutting it off really short, then turn it to the right to allow longer. If it sounds the other way, turn it to the left. If you turn it to the left, as soon as they finish singing, it's going to release it. So you're not going to hear the effect at all. The more that you do to the right, the more you're actually going to hear the compressor working, because she may be going, oh, and stop, but it may be, oh, and bringing it down slower than what would naturally happen. So you want to try to match that. That's just something you play with in the release, just using your ears to listen. If it doesn't sound normal, then change your release time. I generally set just kind of a middle of the road, and then if it still sounds funky, more so the release on the gates and the compressors with drums than vocals. You can generally tell there. Okay, and the gain. This is little Susie Sunshine. She's so sweet. She just never sings loud at all, and she gets buried by everybody else on the stage. What I can do is, I've got her set at 0 right here. I've used my preamp, and I'm actually getting a good green light right here, but she's still just not loud enough. She just doesn't sing it. I can go to here, and I can turn. Notice what's happening. I'm turning the digital gain up, so now what happens, you'll see 2 lines. Can y'all see that on the screen? There's a yellow line at the top, and then there's the gray line at the bottom. What it basically does is it takes her level right there and automatically pushes it up. So when she sings soft, if she sings anywhere between these 2 lines, it's going to sound the same. Because what I've done is I've gained her up. I've taken her overall digital footprint and I've pushed it up to this level so that if she sings soft, if she goes from this level to that level, there's no difference in the sound because the compressor is keeping her level constant that whole time by having that up. So you have to be careful with the digital gain because you can really crank something up. I mean, because there's a lot, I think there's like 12 dB, yeah. There's a lot of gain, but that is specifically.
Somebody in this church ain't no gain.
For the kids.
Yeah, the girls did when they were singing
Yeah, the kids, that would be good for them, because sometimes they'll do a children's solo
Yeah.
and getting them to.
Right.
Yeah.
They're scared of the mics a lot of times, and that's a good way to make that happen. You know, so that's what that is for. Okay, then we covered the pan left and right. So we've gone the preamp, which is what sets the gain level. The high pass filter is for the handling noise and rolling out the low end of instruments that are duplicating each other. The gate is stopping sounds below a certain threshold. You know, they got to be so loud before it opens the gate. The compressor controls the output volume, and it also raises the volume by using the digital gain on things that are soft. In order to turn these things on, you must press the N button over here on the side. So on this particular application on channel 2, we have a high pass filter, we have a gate turned on, and we have a compressor turned on. Now, a question often comes up is, when should I use a compressor, when should I use a gate? I use compressors and gates on everything vocals, on everything that doesn't stay being used all the time. You have to be careful with the gates, because you want to make sure that if I have, say Casey's preaching and he's on a handheld or on a lapel, well, a handheld would be a better example. He's on the handheld and he's getting ready to preach, and the offertory guy comes up and he's going to pray, and he hands him that mic. Now what happens is we have somebody different on that mic. So the gate might have been right for Casey, but it might be wrong for John, who's going to say the blessing over the offering. So you have to pay attention sometimes in the gate setting if that mic is going to be used by multiple people, or from Sunday to Sunday. If the praise team doesn't always sing on the same mic, you're going to have to readjust those things. So what you might want to do is save a scene in a specific order with the praise team, and then if you have a different praise team that sings the following week, create a separate scene and save those, so that when Ann sings in Praise Team 1, she uses mic 1, but when she sings in Praise Team 2, she might use mic 4. You have a separate setting that are the same, but they're saved in 2 scenes. So if she gets on a different mic, your settings are the same for her. And we'll go over that in a minute as well. Okay, so those are the basic input setups for what we're doing. I'm just going to go over a couple of these features down here to try to give you a basic understanding. The I/O, I'm just going to talk about what these are. This is the patching. You shouldn't have to do this. These are things that we set up once. This establishes whether the signal is coming in from the digital snake or whether it's being plugged in locally to the board. And you can see, based on which one I press here, which are active and which are not active. This is local, which is what is physically plugged into the board. If I patch here, so this shows you what each of these things are, and you should be able to just take your finger and scroll so you can see that the auxiliaries are, you know, all on the output level here. They're mimicked. And you can see the left and the right. You can see where everything is patched. If it has a square on it, what you do, you look at it this way. That's like local, and the main left and right is plugged on 12, is output 12, is the left, right. And then matrix mix 11, matrix mix 1 on the left and matrix mix 1 on the right are actually plugged into A and B on the back, which is what we're going to use in a minute to be able to feed our video feed over here. So just understanding, this is how you look at it. I don't recommend you guys get into monkeying with that unless you're adding, if you're adding microphones into the back, which we're going to be doing. I'm going to be patching in some other wireless mics. What you can't do is have 2 things patched on the same channel. That, you know, you wouldn't want to have channel 1 be patched in down there with a mic and channel 1 up here, because then it's going to have, you're going to have 2 things on the same channel, and it's not going to let you do that. It's going to block it. It'll put an X through the line, or it'll be grayed out. But that's how you navigate it. You just take your finger and move through. So the S-Link, that's what's in the closet down there, and you can see what we have patched, like auxiliary 8, which I think is our subwoofer, and then we have our left and right here on 11 and 12. So those are the way those are established. Then we have let's see what else we got patched here. We got auxiliary 1 is on 1, auxiliary 2 is on 2, auxiliary 4 is on 4. We don't have anything patched. Whoops. We don't have anything patched on.
So there should be only 3 auxiliaries being used, right?
Yes.
Because we only have 3 monitors.
Exactly.
Auxiliaries.
Bingo. Okay, the utility, that basically gives you some information about the board, as far as if you were to say, I need to know what version we're on, I need to know what the IP address is. Like when you were loading the software the other day, that's where you would go to know that you have to match the 192.168.1.77. to be able to input that. So it gives you that information. This is to calibrate. If you want to calibrate your faders, if for some reason you're moving the faders and they just don't seem like when you go to 0, they're all different, you can actually calibrate a fader by going into the utility and calibration, and it'll ask you to move the fader to the top, move the fader to the bottom, and it'll recalibrate a fader if you have one that gets out of whack, which does from occasions. You guys aren't using MIDI, but just basic overview is like if I had a separate touchpad over here and I wanted to operate this from sitting over here, kind of like you're using your iPad to control it, it's just a MIDI controller rather than a network controller. But that's not something you guys are doing, so you won't need that. Let's see here. This is saving the scenes, so we don't have anything saved at the moment. That shows, I set up a scene right here. This is how, like what we have everything set up, we want to save it. You can go into the scenes and you touch here, and where
I've already saved one.
did you save one in it?
Yeah, just that one that says 1. I didn't name it.
Oh, you didn't name
I
it.
just put 1 in.
Gotcha.
I didn't know what to
Okay.
name it, but
Yeah, as a general rule, what I try to do is I'll save it to the 1, and then I'll go all the way down to 99 and save the same scene again, because people aren't as likely to get down there. Because what happens is that you can overwrite the scenes. So naming it as Sunday or something of that nature. I was trying to remember why it didn't pop up to let me actually label it. There was a way to do that. Remember how to actually label them?
I did it on the iPad. I don't know.
Yeah.
You
Yes.
did 1 and 2, didn't you?
I didn't do 2.
I thought you did it for the quartet.
No, that's different.
Yeah, maybe.
I don't know how to get to that on the soundboard. I know how to get to it on the
Yeah,
iPad.
well, that's probably where it is, but yeah. Okay, the USB utility, when you put the thumb drive in right here, this will enable you to format the drive and also to record to the drive. So right now it's set up to record your left and right mix. So like for Carol, where he's like, oh crap, the sound didn't get right over to the mixing board for whatever reason. If you were recording it in the service on that, you could then take that with his video and make them together in a piece of software. So it's just a backup. We do that at our church. We stream live every Sunday, but we've just made the habit of being able to make a copy. Oftentimes the praise team wants a copy themselves. They're like, hey, can I make a copy of that thumb drive so I can hear how I blend with everybody else? Or I just don't know that song very well and I'd like to get a copy of it so I can do better. Or they just like to hear themselves. So it just gives you the options on all of those. Okay, so that's where that recording goes to. All right, in the setup menu, there again, these are all of the things that you see over here to the left are the things that you can get into to set up. The PFAL, which is it's the pre-fade, after fade, listen. That's what PAFL stands for. Pre-fade, after fade, listen, and it's just for your headphones. So if you press the PFAL or PAFL button here, let me do one on where the camera is. If I press that button, it turns yellow, and then it will send that instrument to the headphones, which just allows you to be able to hear a specific singer. Like this happens to me all the time because we do festival sets, and so I'll have 6 groups that are singing. I don't know any of the singers, but there's like 3 or 4 groups that will have 8 singers up there, and I hear somebody sticking out, but I can't tell who they are. I take my PFL with my headphones in, and I walk through it, and I go, ah, you're the dude. I hear your voice, because I recognize his voice, but I don't know which one it is, and I'll use the PFAL to hear who's making the noise, and then I go in and do whatever I need to do to that channel. So it's just a quick way to be able to identify. Now, there is another way to do the PFL. I don't have it set that way because it kind of gets confusing, and that is you can do an additive PFL, which would be is if I want to hear this vocalist and then I want to add that vocalist and I want to add that vocalist, I can listen to all 4 at one time.